Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of So What About AI Agents. Today, we are talking to Alex, who is building AI agents for the healthcare access at scale. His platform works with healthcare plans to engage members through voice, text, and RCS agents. So, walk us through what happens today when a healthcare plan has 50,000 members who haven't done their annual wellness visits. What does the outreach process look like with your agents?
Yeah, so our agents simplify the workflow that's currently done and with multiple resources. So before us, a typical outreach would include somebody sending out letters, somebody sending out emails, or even text messages. And it's all a one-way communication, right? It's not a text message you can reply to. It's not an email you can reply to or somebody to engage you to help you match with the right provider and then schedule that visit. So think of our agents as that last mile solution, kind of a concierge, if you will, that communicates with individual members in the way that they prefer to be communicated, whether it's a voice or text, and it's actionable. It's not just out there to deliver a one-way communication and say, oh, it'd be great if you get this annual wellness visit done. It does in a way that it says, yes, obviously it's great to get an annual wellness visit done, but it also asks the member, do you have a primary care on file? We showed Dr. So-and-so. And a lot of times primary member says, I don't even know who that doctor is. It was assigned to me when I selected a plan. So we help determine how far they're willing to travel. Do they need help with transportation? What preferences they have when they see the provider? A lot of people might have, language preference, or they're looking for a doctor that has certain years of experience, or they have other chronic conditions and they're looking for somebody with more expertise in those chronic conditions. This is all of the things that our agents can solve right there on the call or through a text message, match you with appropriate provider. And then we go a step further. We will then call that provider on behalf of the member. Our agent will be on hold for 30, 40 minutes, navigate the IVRs, press 3 for scheduling, and then have a conversation with the front desk to actually schedule a visit for that individual member. So they don't get lost in the system. They don't forget to call. They don't get discouraged by waiting 30 minutes on the call, or just because the first choice for their provider doesn't have any availability. Our agents will not give up. They'll call the second provider, third provider on the list until they schedule that visit.
Walk us through the entire architecture and what does each layer do?
Yeah, so I'll unpack it, but I'll go from the final goal, right? And then how we got to the goal. So the goal is to have very natural speaking agent that communicates in the same way you and I are talking, right? We have very little latency, unless it's some more complex questions, then, we come back, oh, let me think about it, right? And try to get the response. We've architected the agents to perform just as a human would. And to do that, you can't just select a single skill or single quality agent. We had to build an architecture of multiple agents with different skills, all represented through a single voice or a single output and single input. And with that, we're able to solve the latency that a lot of agents have. With that, we're able to solve the context awareness, the problems that some of the other agents have. So we have conversations that at times last more than 5 minutes. They go into 10 minutes. And we schedule more complex cases, not just annual wellness visit, but capturing medical history and other details from individual members. So all of that takes more complex architecture to be able to deliver the solution in a very human-like interaction. So, and because we're in healthcare, it's very important that our agents deliver accurate information, right? And information is validated and it's correct all the time. So the accuracy is extremely important as well. And that's kind of how we decided to reverse architecture the solution and say, okay, how do we get to this goal, right, of an ideal agent, and how do we deliver this? And we couldn't do it through a single agent, right? So we had to build a solution of multiple agents with different skills, as I said earlier, that all function together seamlessly. And there is that, think of it as a brain that oversees the entire operation and monitors. And yes, there is a small percentage that agents could make a mistake. Well, that brain will catch that mistake and it will correct it, and it will inform the agent that you said something that's not accurate, and the agent will correct it throughout a conversation. And the brain, because it's a lot more powerful and it has a lot more reasoning power, it's a little bit slower than your typical conversation agent. So it does take 2-3 seconds delay sometimes for the brain to respond, but the brain will respond and correct the entire output of the conversation or correct the agent right there on the spot. And, it doesn't stop there. So just because you have a conversation, you delivered a successful result, our agents and the work of the agent doesn't stop there. We analyze every conversation, the output of every conversation to further improve how the agent's interacting, how do we improve the prompts and every other action that agents need to perform throughout this conversation. So it's pretty complex architecture. It's not something that um, a lot of companies aspire like, oh, I can build an agent and I can do it. And look, I just built something in minutes and I can ask it question and provides responses. Well, it's not that simple when it comes to healthcare and when it comes to quality interactions.
What does the workflow look like?
Yeah, the workflow, it's could be slightly different for every use case, but we basically, it's not our first entry into healthcare. We've built products in healthcare for, close to 20 years, a successful product. So it's understanding and unpacking the workflow that exists today and trying to improve it with agents, but not always replacing, right? Because the processes and the workflows in healthcare, a lot of times are established and it takes a long time to approve them. And it takes a longer time to change any of this. So we have to function within the existing workflows and then build agents that support those workflows with minimal change. Yes, when you think of the architecture and the agents and everything they have to do, you kind of have to unpack and diagram and say, okay, what are the functions? What are the steps in getting patient to see the doctor, right? And the first step could be, let's validate the individual's insurance, right? We make sure they still have active insurance. This is their coverage. This is their network. When you do an outreach to a member, you have to have some backup and details on that individual. So every conversation doesn't feel like it's fresh new conversation, right? Because there are data that we have on the member, either comes to us through member themselves or through the plan. And we need to make sure we have that available at the time that we conversate with that individual member. Member, patient kind of have different labels, but let's call them individuals that need care. And then the process throughout. We might have to check eligibility in real time. We might have to make an API call to get providers availability to see when they're available. What are the hours of operation? Something that we store and update on every single call we have the provider as well. So it's not just a conversation, an action. It's also creating that closed loop of every information that we capture or that we gather that feeds back into our data sets and updates it in near real time. So if we call a provider, for example, and they say, that particular location, they only open Mondays, Wednesdays, and Friday and different hours, we would store that detail for the provider. So then when we have a conversation with a patient or an individual, and that individual says that I can only see doctors on Tuesdays and Thursdays, well, we know we can't call that provider, right? Because they're not available those days. So let's call a different provider that might have availability and try to fit them in. So try to make efficiency within the existing workflow, but still follow the processes that exist today. We've built another agent whose entire functionality is to understand and navigate IVR and be able to listen and make a distinction between that's a human talking or that's a navigated system, and then understanding the options that are presented to them against where we have to navigate and connect the member through. So if I'm scheduling, again, the earlier example, annual wellness visit, and we call the IVR, and it's a multi-specialty office, most likely they won't just have a single option for scheduling. Option one is probably going to be what type of specialist do you need. Option two is going to present multiple choices for scheduling or invoicing or billing and so on and so forth. So our agents understand, and we joke about it, they speak in over 20 languages, but they also speak in dial tone. So they're able to replicate a sound, 3 or 2 or 5, whatever the sound that's needed in order to navigate and get to the right place and speak to the right individual.
Interesting. And you mentioned before that voice agents, tend to fall apart after like 5 minutes of conversation. What specifically goes wrong, and what did you build differently to avoid that?
So typical out-of-the-box solution, the agents time out, right? And some agents time out at 3 minutes and 5 minutes, and they're all different default and settings. And it's that context awareness about the conversation. And we've gone deeper than that. It's not just being context aware about this conversation. It's being context aware about all the previous conversations. Basically, we're building member-centric agents. So it will have all the things about you prior to making a call, as well as throughout the conversation. So if there is a disconnect, the agent can call back and say, oh, I'm sorry, we got disconnected. Let's continue where we left off. But the shortfalls of other solutions, they're not thinking that through, right? They're taking a minimum viable product, and most common conversations last between 2 and 5 minutes, right? And they take a default solution focused on that. Well, there is no most common in healthcare, right? We're all unique. We all have different concerns. We have different questions. We might have different preferences. And, the conversations could last longer just because it does, right? Because it's somebody's first time interacting with an agent. It's somebody's first time having an agent find them and match them with a provider, and they have questions. how do you match the provider? What characteristic did you compare for matching the providers? And my agents will answer all those questions and try to get you to that final goal of, whether it's scheduling a visit or getting information. It's, yeah, you have to think not just in MVP in healthcare, you have to think wide, what could happen, run through different scenarios.
And at what volume did you start to see failures in your own system that you didn't expect? And what kind of failures did you see?
We started seeing it early on, not even with a huge volume, just with internal testing. Again, because of our experience, we can predetermine our tests, and it's the way we're writing our test, and we build our own simulator capability. So we throw all the things that we can go just based on our experience, what could possibly happen on the call, and we run them through a simulator model. And sometimes we put like 1,000 calls through a simulator. We understand what the volume is, 10,000 calls, and we increase those numbers. And it's also testing just the throughput capacity of the agents, how many simultaneous calls they can have, at what point do we need to break up and build kind of like new agents to support the volume, but also to run through different scenarios and see what could happen. Could be early volume, and having some of that experience with the technology that allows us to pretty much troubleshoot before we go live and before we launch into the market.
Right. And healthcare has zero tolerance for errors. So if your agent schedules something wrong or gives incorrect information about coverage, that's a problem, right? How do you enforce compliance across agents, right? How do you make sure that they don't make those mistakes? What does your validation layer look like?
Yeah, so you're right. And it's a problem not just with a single individual you interacted, but think of a healthcare, three components to it always. You have the individual patient, you have a health plan, which basically our customer who we represent, and then you have providers, which plans customer, and as well as it's, someone who cares for that patient. Quality is our top priority, right? The compliance of every single conversation. Protocol, make sure that we follow the protocol, ask every questions, got every response, and everything has to be documented for the compliance. And we, collected every single consent. So again, it's the way that we built the architecture with Observer, that our observer, the brain, has context of the entire protocol, what has to happen on this call, what steps have to be completed, whether it's capturing compliance, whether it's validating address or phone number, getting the insurance details, references, and a bunch of other things, as well as through, and we carry that not just through a single interaction, because most of our engagements have probably 2 to 3 different interactions. One with individual patient, one potentially with the member services to help fill in certain gaps, and then the third one would be with the provider. So we carry that compliance and the protocol across all of these interactions.
Have you had a situation where the agent made a mistake that could have caused harm? Like what happened and how did you change it? And what safeguards are you consistently putting in place as you identify things with your monitoring?
Yeah, so definitely we had some instances of these situations. The good thing about those instances were caught right there on the call. So when we mistook a date or a number, for example, today is on every ninth Monday, for example, right? And the agent calls and schedules the call, and agent says, "Oh, I'd like to schedule for Monday, February 10th," right? Our brain, the observer agent, would catch that mistake and it would correct it and say, "Oh, we apologize. We made a mistake. Monday is February 9th. So anything available for today, February 9th," right? So a couple of errors that were made because of the architecture and all of the precautions that we put in place were actually corrected on that call. So as of today, we didn't have anything that happened that we had to go back and follow up and correct. So that's basically gives us confidence and assurances that the architecture we put together actually solves and corrects the issue right there on the call. And of course, after the call, we evaluated and we made adjustments. We still evaluate and listen to all the conversations that are being recorded, make sure that these mistakes don't happen in the future. But we are moving towards a fully self-automated model that once it learns enough and we have these millions of calls and volumes going through our system, that would be able to do less human and more of the agent's oversight and improvements.
So give us the actual numbers. Like how many calls are you doing per day? What does your conversion look like on gaps in care outreach versus like a traditional method? How many appointments are your agents scheduling per day or per week?
Yeah, so we're early on. We are not yet ready to disclose the numbers. We're going through a few pilots at the moment. So these numbers, pilots and clients, we're not releasing those names yet. And we are a B2B solution. So we work primarily through a lot of strategic partnerships that white label our solution as they deploy it into the market. So they have existing relationships with these plans. Some of them actually have services behind it. So they're delivering, whether it's in-home assessments or I know wellness visits themselves as a service organization. And we are working with them and we are augmenting or fully replacing other call centers that exist today. So the work that's done, it's by call centers, and now we are coming in with our agents. We're able to deliver it at less cost and a much larger scale, right? And for a lot of our pays, the call centers have to be in the United States. So it's not just the scale, complexity, but it's also the call centers have very high turnover rate and very high cost for operating them. So this is just a perfect fit for the solution for the market today.
So, what is the cost of a scheduled appointment versus a cost of a human doing the same thing?
Yeah, so we're coming in probably between 50 and 70% less than a traditional human cost for scheduling these visits. If you think about it, every single call that you make typically to a provider, you have an average between 10 and 12 minutes hold times. You have to dial more than a single provider. And it's not that easy getting members or individuals on the phone either. And the call centers have limited capabilities just to call, right? Because we have ability to reach out to member, if we have their permission by text, you get much better acceptance and participation rate. Then we're able to reach out by phone, and we have the capability that the conversation can start by phone, transition to a text, start by text, transition to a phone. So it's omni-channel through a single session.
Mhm.
Not just the capability of the agent, but because of that context awareness, we can switch between devices and continue the single conversation. We're able to secure a much higher rate of engagement, both on the patient side and much higher rate of completing scheduled visits on the provider side. And our agents don't sleep, right? So our agents work 24 hours a day, around the clock. They can engage with the individual anytime, day or night. But then we have that hours of operation that the agent will then call the provider and engage with them. So we're offering the capability that today is outside of the typical call center. We're able to deliver it between, like I said, 50 to 60% cheaper than the existing call center, and we're able to support the much greater scale and volume. As you work a lot of these campaigns with plans, it's not like you're going to be calling X number of members every single month. So you can build your team and say, excuse me, I'm going to need 20, live agents that are going to be making these many calls. A lot of these campaigns is like, you have to call 100,000 members between today and the end of the month. And then we'll see the results of your outreach campaign and you see how many of them scheduled a visit, how many of them went to see the provider. And then we might repeat it 3 or 6 months from now, right? Or there's going to be a new gap in care identified. So for us with the agents, we can make, 10,000 calls just in the next minute, or we can make 10,000 calls over a month. So we can support definitely volume scale.
Right. And, you mentioned before expanding beyond the gaps to care for any reason. A member just texts, I have lower back pain, and the agent handles everything. How far are you from that being live?
We are working with an organization that has provided directories and they're working with a number of different health plans. And if you ever log into your health plan without giving a name, most likely it's going to be that organization that you're going to go to provider network and find those individual, the doctors that you need for search. We're looking to enable that capability for any particular search. Whether it's your back pain, whether you're spraining the knee, you have a sore throat, you want to get a flu vaccine, whatever that might be, our agents can communicate any kind of reason, schedule for any reason. And we're taking it outside of just provider scheduling. We're looking into transportation scheduling. We're looking at any kind of lab scheduling, MRIs, mammograms, things like that, that basically, because the care, it's more than just seeing a doctor, right? A lot of times it's, I have to get the diagnostics done. I have to get the lab done. I have to see a doctor. I don't have a way of getting to and from the doctor. So we can close all those gaps, right? Like think about it as a last mile solution for any healthcare access needed. And as we're expanding, we're going to keep adding use cases. But today, kind of like everything within these parameters of access and scheduling, our agents can cover.
Makes sense. So, what do you think in the end of the day as a product manager? You are now getting more technical, right? Are you actually shipping stuff to production, or is it still more of your technical team that's doing it and you just oversee the final product?
Engaged from writing a story and, being a startup, you have to wear multiple hats and multiple vests and shirts. and everything else. So yeah, I'm involved from the very beginning, from identifying the need, communicating with our customers, transitioning that to stories, everything from identifying a market, a need, writing the stories, transitioning the stories, participating in every stand up, engaged in testing, validating, assisting our sales, doing the demos, assisting all of our strategic partners and jumping on their demo calls. That all falls within my domain of things that I need to do on a daily basis. But I love product. I love building products, and it's very exciting. And I really love customer-driven development when the product is finally live, and then you start getting feedback from your customers, or you're learning things from interacting with the end users, and that starts driving your pipeline. So yes, it's great to be, and we are innovative, and we always, as we build our next 6, 12 months roadmap, we see what are the innovations, what are the new things that are coming. But at the same time, we don't want to just go and pre-build a million things, right? We kind of need to get the feedback from our end users, feedbacks from our customers that helps us form that roadmap for the most part, and still leaving that 20 to 30% to innovation, and probably more early on, early days. But as you all know, once your product is more established and more deployed, and especially in healthcare, healthcare doesn't allow you to make changes every day, because once it's embedded and you have so many providers and healthcare administrators and everybody trained, it's hard to just implement some changes that impact their everyday today. So early on, we implemented a lot of these capabilities, like around feature toggles. We still want to be able to release things every single day, every week, as the product rolls out. But we also have to take into account that not all of our customers or end users are able to implement those changes.
All right. And my final question is, what are some of the takeaways, or what are some of the earned insights you can share with our audience about building voice agents and shipping them in production? What are some of the, I know you've shared a lot of things, but what are like the, for example, the top three things that they should think about when shipping voice agents?
Validation. Number one would be validation. I think it's critical. Go outside of what you think the normal conversation is or normal engagement is. Take it, ask random questions. See how, if your typical conversation is 5 minutes, make it 10 minutes, right? Things will happen. It's healthcare. Two is, empathy. It's priority for healthcare, right? So as you're training and you're building your agents, and even as you start analyzing and building the knowledge base, how to handle objections, how to handle responses, you have to make sure that the first thing is, after quality, is empathy. And it's extremely important in healthcare, being able to understand, who you engage and who you're interacting with at that moment and how to handle that conversation. And third is healthcare is enterprise. It's great to identify what your entry solution might be for this particular use case. But if you think about how you're going to deploy this solution, you have to think enterprise-wide. Can I scale this solution? Yes, I understand that for the first entry, this is my core, this is my entry, this is what I'm going to get in with and a problem I'm going to solve. But am I going to be able to scale it, or do I have to completely re-architect and build this? On the other side, on the purchasing side, health systems or health plans, they're not looking at single point solutions anymore. Those days are gone. So whenever they're looking at a solution, they're going to see, okay, it's going to solve my need today, but is that the vendor I'm going to be able to stay with for all these other potential use cases? Because they're kind of at the max of number of vendors they can manage. So think about, when you're architecting your solution, is that something I'm going to be able to scale? Am I going to be able to support other use cases within what you determine the problems you're going to solve?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. This is Alex Zoller from PatientGenie. Check them out. Connect to him on LinkedIn. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Felipe, thank you so much for your time. Happy to engage with the audience. Would love to be back as we release our solution and get more clients under our belt, and keep you informed once we hit that 1 million scheduled visits, which should be coming up soon.